And we're all calling on the government to follow suit.
It's now time for our political panel, and joining me today is the Labor MP Josh Wilson and Liberal MP Bridget Archer. Welcome both of you to Capitol Hill. Josh, I'll start with you. You were just listening to Andrew Wilkie in the chamber there. What should the government's response to these allegations be?
Well, they're serious allegations and they should be taken seriously, and the Minister for Resources has already indicated that she will be looking into it, and that's appropriate. I mean, if what Mr Wilkie said is true, if there have been instances where any company that exports out of Australia have been doing so on a false basis, that's not acceptable, and it's not acceptable in the individual instance, but of course it would do harm to our reputation as an exporter of high quality and integrity. So he's raised these matters quite legitimately, and the government has already said that it will look into them and it is taking them seriously.
Do you think a parliamentary committee or inquiry would be an appropriate place to try and get to the bottom of this?
Well, it's early days as far as the best way of dealing with it. When the Minister responds by saying that the government will take it seriously and is already actually looking into it, I think that that's a good indication of how responsive the government is to what is a serious allegation. And then if there are further mechanisms that are required, I guess that will play out in the time to come.
Bridget Archer, we heard from some of the Teal independents just there, and from Andrew Wilkie as well, talking about the importance of whistleblower protections. Just leaving aside these specific allegations and just focusing on the bill for a national anti-corruption commission, do you believe there are enough protections for whistleblowers in that legislation?
Look, there absolutely needs to be strong protections for whistleblowers as part of an integrity framework. We have had assurances from the Attorney-General that there will be additional legislation brought forward to deal with the issue of whistleblowers, and that must sit alongside an anti-corruption commission. So I take the Attorney-General at his word, and I look forward to seeing that worked through constructively, because much like an integrity commission, I think that these issues should be beyond partisan politics. And what Mr Wilkie has said today gives you know, the importance of having protections for whistleblowers. You need to have people be able to have a mechanism to bring this information forward and know that they are protected. These are, you know, very serious matters, but also there's a lot at stake, and whistleblowers risk an awful lot, and there are many cases that point to the risks borne by whistleblowers in bringing forward this information.
You've previously crossed the floor of Parliament to support a discussion about an integrity commission. Do you believe that the coalition is going to support this and get on board with an act?
Look, I do, and I'm very pleased that appears to be the case. I think there will still be some discussion and some debate around the edges of the legislation. That's probably been foreshadowed in the committee inquiry into the bill, and the crossbenchers indicated that they seek to move some amendments as well. That's a normal process and a good one, but I think that I have always said that in order for an integrity commission to be successful, it can't be political, or it will fail at the first hurdle.
Okay, what about the edges that Bridges refers to there? One of the sticking points has been public hearings. There's been a lot of debate over the past couple of weeks. Do you still believe that the government has got the balance right here, Josh?
I think it absolutely has got the balance right, and I think it's important that the broader community sees the big picture. As Monique Ryan was saying in the piece before we came on, one of the things the Australian community said loud and clear is we want to see improvement to the integrity and anti-corruption architecture at the federal level. It's been a missing piece for a long period of time. The former government promised to do it and didn't. Today is the 6-month anniversary of the election of the Albanese Labor government, and I think in the next fortnight we have the prospect of putting in place this long-awaited National Anti-Corruption Commission. Now, some of the noise around the issue of public hearings, I think, springs from a bit of a misunderstanding that this doesn't already happen perhaps with the state and territory-based bodies, which of course it does. And that the bottom line here is that the independent commissioner will be the person who gets to decide whether a public hearing is appropriate or whether a private hearing in some cases is appropriate, because in some cases, if you don't have a private hearing, you might jeopardise criminal prosecutions or other further judicial processes.
Okay, let's go to one of the other big stories this week, industrial relations. You need the Senate crossbench in the Senate to get this over the line. They want more time to discuss this and debate it. Should they get it?
Well, from the start of this government, we've been providing as much parliamentary time and time in sort of general public debate around the issues of priority. We're very clear about our intention to act on stagnant and falling real wages. Again, that's been a terrible state of affairs for a decade, and something needs to be done. We've been upfront in sharing the details of the legislation. They've been debated extensively and passed in the House. Now it's time for the Senate to be part of that conversation. I'm hopeful, of course, as a member of the government, that we can get to the point somewhere in the next fortnight of having that change made, because we need it to get wages going and to provide more secure employment in this country and to tackle the gender pay gap.
What's your view on this bill, Bridget Archer, as somebody who's crossed the floor previously? Do you believe that this is necessary to boost wages?
Look, I think everybody agrees that it is necessary to boost wages, and again, people are going to potentially argue about how you do that, or whether there may be unintended consequences in relation to the bill. I think the important part is that the Senate, in dealing with this now, from everything that I can see, are coming to that in good faith, and I think that's really important, that there are good faith discussions about this and what the impacts, both positive and potentially negative, might be. I think that's a good thing. It's what we come here to do, and if people indicate that they need time to do that, I hope that the government will meet them in good faith to do that, because it's important to get it right, because we want to see real wages rise. We want to see businesses stay in business so that people have jobs to go to, and we want to see our economy recover coming through the pandemic, and all of those things have got to kind of work together.
What about splitting up the bill? Because if we listen to Jackie Lambie, the crossbench senator, she says about 80% of this has bipartisan support. If it was split up, do you think the coalition should swing behind it?
Look, certainly I think that there are parts of the bill that are uncontested and that they would easily pass. There are other parts that people have what I think are legitimate concerns about, and as I said, they're approaching those concerns, I think, in good faith to work with the government to try and take it forward.
So, Josh Wilson, why not split up the bill? Why not take what you've got, bipartisan support for about 80% of this bill, and take what you have before the end of the year?
Well, I think that will just hold up progress. And, one thing you learn in this place is you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. So in areas where there will be times when people advance the criticism, or you're going too fast, equally people will be telling you, well, get on with it, you're going too slow. And we were elected to government with a number of key things, obviously action on climate change, action when it comes to a National Anti-Corruption Commission, getting wages moving at a time of rising cost of living. We want to get on with those things. We've done it on a consultative basis, both in the general community, through the Jobs Summit, now in the Parliament. And I think we need to remember, this is some of the sort of insider pool, I guess. But when I was here a couple of weeks ago, whilst we were having the debate in the House of Representatives, the coalition was calling quorum every other speaker and essentially using delaying tactics. So on the one hand, I think people do need to watch us close enough to understand that while occasionally members of the crossbench, or more particularly the coalition, will say that they want more time, they're actually taking up time occasionally with other funny games.
A parliamentary procedure, one for people who might be following at home, the loyal Capitol Hill audience. But can I ask you as well about another really big issue just quickly before we move on? There's been this promise for some sort of intervention in the market to deal with power prices. What is the best way to do that without adding to inflation?
Well, that's for the minister to speak to. I'm not going to come on your show
and have a view on this, though, as hearing from your constituents.
We are taking on again. I do start to sound like a stuck record, but we are again taking on an area that has been neglected for 10 years. There was no energy policy in this country. We saw a net loss of 3 gigawatts of generation under the term of the last government, and in the shadow of an election, they brought in legislation to specifically hide rising power prices.
Yes, but you've been in government for 6 months now. 6 months today. So what direction would you like to see the government go in?
We've already moved forward with aspects of our Powering Australia plan. The Treasurer has tasked the ACCC with having a look at the Code of Conduct in the gas industry. The Minister for Resources has already struck a heads of agreement that's going to see additional gas supply come into the market. Those are meaningful things. There are other options under consideration, but I'm not going to be the person to look into the crystal ball and tell you what happens next.
Bridget Archer, do you fancy looking into a crystal ball? What would you like to see happen to bring down energy prices, which I know is a big deal in your electorate as well?
Look, I'd like to see something happen, and if Josh hasn't got the crystal ball, it's unlikely that I will from opposition. But it is important, and whether it's taking action more broadly to address power prices or cost of living more generally, it is hurting our communities. Communities are really starting to feel the pinch of cost of living pressures, certainly in my part of the world. And with the greatest respect, the government is now the government, and you can't keep looking backwards. You've got to sort of take us forward and look to the future. So it's squarely in the government's court now to work to address these cost of living challenges for Australians.
Okay, we'll leave it there for now. Bridget Archer and Josh Wilson, thank you very much for joining Capitol Hill.
Thank you.